It was 9:47 p.m. on a quiet Thursday in Chesapeake, Virginia, the sort of night where the neighborhood seemed to breathe in unison. Streetlights hummed, crickets rehearsed in the hedges. Inside his living room, Michael Carter sat in his work shirt with a plate of leftovers cooling on the coffee table, the TV muted to a loop of highlights no one was really watching. Upstairs, Laura, his wife, was brushing her teeth, already thinking about tomorrow's errands. Down the hall, their son Ethan bent over a worksheet, chasing the last few lines of an algebra proof. The house felt ordinary in that comforting end-of-day way. Then came the pounding. Bang, bang, bang. "Open up! You're in violation!" Michael didn't stand at first. He simply stilled. The sentence was a blade. The voice wasn't the practiced firmness of a cop, and it wasn't the neighborly apology of someone who'd knocked too hard. It was clipped, angry, like a command meant to be obeyed. He rose slowly. At the peephole, he saw no swirling blue lights, no cruisers, no uniforms, just three men in dark jackets, stamped with the HOA logo that usually arrived only on newsletters and sternly worded envelopes. Not clipboards in their hands, but flashlights. And one of them had already braced a boot against the door. Michael opened his mouth to speak through the wood. "What's going on?" "You're in violation," the tallest one barked. "Too many vehicles on your property. You've ignored citations. We're here to enforce compliance." Michael had endured the petty stuff, grass an inch too high, bins at the curb 10 minutes past pickup, a stern email about a basketball hoop that wasn't even theirs. But this was different. This was inside the home, kind of different. He'd barely drawn a breath when the boot hit. The door exploded inward with a crack that seemed to split the evening. Laura screamed upstairs. Ethan jerked so hard his pencil snapped. The men surged into the living room, flashlights cutting the walls into bars of light and shadow. Michael didn't lunge. He anchored, feet planted, shoulders set, chin level like he had in places far away, with far higher stakes. "Step back," he said, voice low and commanding. "You don't belong in my house." One of them jabbed a light toward the window where Ethan's car sat beside Michael's old pickup. "4 vehicles. Regulations say 3. You were warned. Laura, call the police." Michael projected toward the stairs. "Don't try anything," the leader snapped. "We have authority." Michael took a measured step forward. The temperature in his voice dropped 10 degrees. "This isn't authority, it's breaking and entering." Upstairs, Laura's voice, tight and clear, carried through the phone. "Dispatch, 3 men in HOA jackets. Forced entry. Our address is—" The men faltered. They weren't used to being challenged. Inside. Someone's living room. Usually the letters worked. Usually people paid. Usually they mumbled apologies at the door and shuffled cars like chess pieces. Michael held their eyes, unblinking. "You've made a mistake. You crossed the line. A beat." One of them tugged the leader's sleeve, whispered something. The leader stared at Michael a second longer, swallowed, and jerked his chin toward the door. "This isn't over," he hissed. "You'll regret this." The door slammed behind them, leaving the frame splintered, and the house ringing with a silence that had weight to it. Ethan edged down the stairs, eyes wide. "Dad, who were they?" Michael kept his gaze on the door. "Men who thought they could scare us. They picked the wrong house." He was right about half of that. Red and blue washed over the broken frame 12 minutes later. 2 Chesapeake officers stepped up, one older with a jaw like a tired anvil, one younger working too hard to keep his poker face. "What's the disturbance?" the older asked, as if the question weren't staring back at him in splinters. Michael pointed at the frame. 3 men from the HOA broke into my home, forced entry. My wife and son witnessed the whole thing." The younger flicked his beam from Wood to Michael to partner, as if hoping someone else would make the call. They said they were HOA? They were HOA, Michael said evenly. Jackets, logo, their exact words. You're in violation. Laura stepped into the room, knuckles white around her phone. We want to press charges. They terrified us. The officers shared a look that said, "This is messy." The older cleared his throat. Mr. Carter, sometimes these HOA folks get, overzealous. But this might be more of a civil matter than— Civil? Michael's voice didn't rise, it hardened. My door's busted. Strangers crossed my threshold without permission. Call it trespassing. Call it breaking and entering. If I did this to their house, would I be in cuffs? Silence. Ethan from the stairs muttered, They don't care, Dad. The younger officer tried again. Do you have video? Doorbell cam? Not this time, Michael said, but you've got 2 witnesses right here. A reluctant notepad appeared. A ballpoint clicked. We'll write a report, the older said. For charges, you'll need to take it up with the board. Maybe file a complaint in civil court. That's, the system, Michael exhaled once, slow. I've operated in combat zones where the rules of engagement were stricter than what you just described. Men who force entry should be arrested, not excused. The older officer stared, then nodded without conviction, and kept writing. When they left, the house felt heavier than before. Ethan's voice came small and angry. So, they get away with it. Michael's jaw worked. Not for long. He scrolled his phone, stared at an old name, and pressed call. Daniel Brooks. Michael, it's been a minute. I need you. In trouble? In the middle of it. Say where? Chesapeake. My family's rattled. 3 HOA. Guys forced their way in. Police shrugged. Daniel's tone shifted into the old gear. You're not alone. I'll pull a couple of the guys. Tomorrow, Michael finally sat, tension leaking from his shoulders but not his eyes. Laura touched his arm. Are you sure? They brought force into our home, he said. It's time they see what discipline looks like. Morning found Michael in a corner booth at the diner on Portsmouth Boulevard. Coffee steamed. A bell jingled, and through the door came Daniel Brooks. Broad-shouldered, clean-cut, the kind of presence that made spaces feel supervised. With him, Adrian Lopez, wiry and observant, and Thomas Reed, tall and quiet with a scar that whispered a biography. The handshake was an embrace with bone in it. Tell us, Daniel said. Michael did, without color or fluff, just the facts and the edge they carried. Adrian let out a low whistle. Textbook intimidation. Loud. Late. Make the family feel small. Thomas scanned the windows as if they might move. They expected you to fold. Daniel leaned forward. So, what's our move? Michael set his mug down. We're not breaking doors. We're not throwing elbows. We're showing up. Calm. Cameras rolling. Presence. We walk into their office and ask them to say out loud what they did. If they didn't do it, they name who did. Thomas nodded. Cameras cut both ways. Don't give them a frame they can twist. Understood. Names? Daniel asked. Richard Cole, chairman. Thinks he wears a badge you can't see. Helen Morris, treasurer. Sharp with numbers, sharper with threats. Paul Turner, enforcement. My money says he sent the door kickers. Daniel's smile didn't reach his eyes. We'll be professional, Michael. But this needs to see sunlight. They paid cash and left. The air outside tasted like resolve. The HOA headquarters on Greenbrier Parkway looked like any other office. Beige walls, glass doors, motivational posters that only ever motivated the person who ordered them. But families had mortgages under this roof, and people whispered the names spoken in its hallways. Michael and the men stepped through the doors as one. The receptionist straightened, phone halfway to her ear. "Can I help you?" "Yes," Michael said, voice easy. "The board." "It's urgent. They're in a meeting," she replied, the syllables stiff with policy. "You'll need an appointment." "We'll wait." She studied the 6 of them, then dialed. A minute later, the double doors swung open like a scene that had been rehearsed. Out came Richard Cole, large in frame and flush in face, followed by Helen Morris, precise in a gray blazer, and Paul Turner, whose jaw seemed to default to clenched. "If it isn't Mr. Carter," Cole announced to the room, "care to explain why you're barging into a board meeting with your friends?" Michael didn't blink. "3 men wearing your logo broke into my home last night. They shouted about violations, terrified my family, and damaged my door. I want answers." Now Kevin Wu, who'd joined them with a compact camera rig, angled his chest to catch Cole's face. The live stream icon pulsed invisibly to everyone in the room except the people who mattered. Turner scoffed, playing to the back row. "That's a wild accusation." "We don't condone trespassing." "Then who sent them?" Michael asked. "They wore your jackets, spoke your language. You're in violation." "They said it in my living room." Morris folded her arms. "Perhaps if you'd complied months ago, it wouldn't have escalated." "Regulations don't give you the right to smash down doors," Michael said. Daniel stepped forward a half step, hands visible, tone level. "We're not here to debate lawn care. We're here because a family was violated. If you condone that, say it on record. If you don't, name who gave the order." Cole tugged his collar, heat rising under the skin. "You think marching in here with a gang of ex-soldiers makes you strong? It makes you desperate. You're trying to intimidate us." Adrian's reply was a scalpel. "Intimidation is what those men did at night in a family's home. This is accountability." There was a pause, the kind that shows a person what they look like from the outside. Kevin's phone buzzed in his pocket. Comments were already climbing. Neighbors, then friends of neighbors, then people who just recognized the pattern. Michael finished it. "I served this country so families like mine could live without fear in their own homes. You violated that. This ends here. We'll use every lawful path, every public channel, until there's accountability." Cole opened his mouth, found no language he liked, and closed it. The men turned and walked out as slowly as they'd come in. They didn't slam the door. They didn't have to. Outside, Kevin held up his phone. "It's spreading." "Fast. Good," Michael said, calm settling like a coat over armor. "Let the neighborhood see who's been running it." By Sunday afternoon, the neighborhood was a beehive. People who'd nodded and gone back to their lawns now lingered on sidewalks. Screens on porches replayed the clip. In the comments, finally, "Same thing happened here. Thought I was alone." Melissa Grant, a single mom with her hair pulled into a practical knot, walked across the street clutching a thin folder. "I saw the video," she said, voice low but clear. "Thank you. Last year they fined me $300 because my son left a basketball hoop by the curb one night. I paid to keep the peace. But seeing you, I realize they don't scare everyone." "They count on silence," Michael said gently. "Silence isn't protection. It's permission." The stories began to braid. Henry and Margaret Wells, retired and kind, had racked up appearance violations during Margaret's back surgery. David Singh, a father of 3, had received lien threats during the pandemic. A dozen others added small stones, and together the pile grew heavy. That evening, a knot of neighbors formed on Michael's lawn. Not a rally, not yet, but the shape of one. Kevin recorded carefully, faces turned by consent, words respected, nothing sensationalized. We've all been afraid to speak, Melissa said to the group. But if we stand together, they can't pick us off one by one. Exactly, Adrian said. Bullies isolate. Unity breaks the tactic, Thomas added. Stay disciplined. Anger makes their job easier. Evidence, truth, unity. That's the path. Michael lifted his voice so it carried to the hedges. They kicked down my door. They thought no one would stop them. The only reason it happened is because fear trained us to be quiet. That ends now. Together, applause, first hesitant, then real. Across the street, Stephen Ward, a longtime defender of the board at community meetings, crossed his arms. Careful, Michael, he called. You stir up too much, you'll end up in court. Or worse. They've got money, lawyers, connections. You think a few angry neighbors can beat that? Michael faced him, voice steady. I've stood in places where the other side had more weapons and more numbers. You know what we had? Truth. It wins more than you think. Stephen shook his head, but he didn't shout back. By sunset, people headed indoors with a new way to walk. Not louder, straighter. Monday morning, the HOA board blasted a mass email. Clarification regarding recent misunderstandings. In it, they denied everything. No authorized representatives had entered Michael's home. Dangerous rumors were spreading. Legal action might be necessary to protect the board's good name. They're calling us liars, Laura said at the kitchen table, hands trembling as she read. Then we'll answer with proof, Michael said, sliding the printout into a folder already thick with photos, timestamps, Ethan's notes, a receipt for the emergency brace on the door. Now what? Ethan asked. Now, Michael said, we get a lawyer. The waiting room of Amanda Harris's office smelled like coffee and perseverance. Diplomas marched along the wall. Amanda greeted them with a firm grip and an expression that said she had seen this movie before. They laid everything on her desk, photos of splinters and scuffs, Laura's written statement, Ethan's notes, Kevin's footage, neighbors ready to testify. Amanda flipped, scanned, weighed. This isn't civil, she said at last. It's criminal. Trespass, property damage, likely harassment. The denial email makes it worse. It reads like a cover. I'll file a criminal complaint with the Commonwealth's attorney and prepare a civil suit for damages and harassment. But hear me. They will try to bury you in paperwork, call you the harasser, paint you as unstable. They have money. They've done this before, Laura leaned in. To who? Amanda opened a slim binder of past case summaries, quiet settlements, diffused complaints, homeowners who gave up when the invoices started arriving. Michael's hands tightened on the chair. Then they picked the wrong man. Amanda's smile was the kind that shows teeth without threat. Good. Because I'm taking the case, and the more neighbors who come forward, the stronger we are. They'll speak, Michael promised. I'll make sure. The story refused to stay local. A Norfolk news segment ran, Chesapeake homeowner says HOA representatives forced entry. They showed the lobby confrontation, bleeped nothing, and let the pauses do the condemnation. The phone rang and kept ringing. Support, reporters, a pastor inviting Michael to speak at a community forum, and then a certified letter with the HOA seal. Laura read the amount twice, as if numbers might behave if stared at. $500,000 in a defamation claim. Michael tore it in half. Desperation, not strength, Amanda agreed. A scare tactic. They're trying to swing your time and energy toward defense. We'll counterfile immediately. That evening, unfamiliar cars drifted the block like sharks. Ethan spotted a black SUV make the turn for the third time. Griff, Marcus Hayes, had arrived by then, all quiet mass and soft hands that could bend steel, but mostly fixed things. He walked to the curb, arms folded. The cars lost interest. Cameras went up on Michael's eaves the next morning, cloud-connected and motion-sensitive. If sunlight was the plan, Michael would flood the yard with it. The courthouse itself wasn't grand: red brick, white dome, the ordinary architecture of civic promise. But the morning of the hearing, the steps thrummed like a heart. Michael walked up with Laura and Ethan. Behind them, Daniel, Adrian, Thomas, Griff, and Kevin. Not soldiers anymore, just a line that said he's not alone. Inside, the board sat with their attorneys, Cole looking everywhere but at Michael, Morris whispering with intensity, Turner rigid as a fence post. Judge Robert Miller, no nonsense, spare with words, called the case. Oaths were taken. Amanda rose. Your Honor, this is about abuse of authority. Individuals in HOA insignia forced entry into my client's home at night. His family was terrified. When he sought accountability, the board responded with denial and intimidation. We will show a pattern of harassment, and we will show that what happened to the Carters is not an isolated mistake. The board's attorney countered with smooth confidence. This is a smear. A disgruntled homeowner turning a minor vehicle dispute into a spectacle. But evidence has a way of speaking in a voice that fills rooms. Kevin's video played: the foyer, the chairs, the reception desk, Michael's measured insistence, Cole's flush, the exact choreography of denial. Next, photos of splintered wood, metal scuffs, the door that would not quite shut. Laura's statement, Ethan's calm retelling, the flashlight beams on the walls, the words, "You're in violation," echoing where bedtime should have. Neighbors followed, Henry and Margaret Wells, hand in hand, David Singh, steady, and then Melissa Grant, voice cracking only once. They told me I could lose my home. I didn't sleep. I paid fines I couldn't afford because I was scared. When I saw Michael stand there and simply not be scared, I realized we were many. That's why I'm here. Objection. Overruled. The judge leaned forward. I am listening. When Michael took the stand, he didn't turn into a speech. He spoke like a father whose front door mattered. I know what danger feels like. I never expected to feel it in my living room because someone thought a rule book over a driveway gave them permission to act like police. This isn't about cars. It's about respect. Respect doesn't come from fear. It comes from fairness. By the end of the session, the board's denials looked thin beside the stack of paper and the faces attached to it. Judge Miller didn't rule on the spot. He rarely did. But he closed with a sentence that spread faster than the video had. These allegations are serious. This court does not and will not tolerate abuse of authority under the guise of community management. Outside, the steps were a river of microphones. Michael didn't deliver fire. He gave them something steadier. This isn't about me, he said, Laura's hand in his. It's about families who've felt powerless in the place that should feel safest. People who should serve chose to dominate. When neighbors stand together, that ends. Applause wasn't the point, but it rose anyway. That night the porch felt like a harbor. The temporary brace on the door creaked faintly in the breeze. Ethan sat beside his father, legs stretched toward the steps. So what now? He asked. Now we wait for the ruling, Michael said. But something already changed. What? People stopped whispering. Laura came out with 3 mugs, leaned her head on Michael's shoulder. You gave them their voices back. He shook his head. They already had them. They just needed a reason to use them. Across the street, porch lights blinked on. A basketball thumped driveway, concrete 3 houses away. Somewhere, a dog barked at nothing in particular. Life, not fear. Life. In the days that followed, yards looked a little more like families lived in them and a little less like brochures. Neighbors waved with their whole arms. The board still had lawyers, it still had money, but the neighborhood had something new. each other, and that proved heavier. Authority is only as strong as the people who accept it without question. The moment fear is replaced by unity, bullies lose their shape. Never underestimate what happens when one person stands up and everyone else realizes they can too. For Michael Carter, victory wasn't a headline or a gavel. It was a repaired door, a quiet street, and a family who slept through the night. And in a small corner of Chesapeake, that was enough to change everything.